The lawyer's voice echoed through our small living room like thunder across the bay. The family home goes to Dev. I stood frozen, the teacup in my hand suddenly weighing 1,000 pounds. My younger brother's smirk cut through the humid air, sharp and satisfied. Our mother turned her face toward the window, unable to meet my eyes. In that single moment, everything I'd believed about family shattered like glass against stone. I'd spent 30 years caring for this house, nursing our father through his final illness, keeping the roof from leaking and the walls from crumbling. Yet here I was, being erased from my own story. The ocean breeze pushed through the open window, carrying salt and the scent of fish drying on the nets outside. My father's body wasn't even cold yet, buried just 3 days ago beside the old lighthouse. Still, I forced myself to smile, blinking back the burning behind my eyes. "Congratulations, Dev," I whispered. "My name is Arun. I'm the eldest son of a fisherman who believed promises mattered more than paper, and loyalty meant more than gold." I stood outside our family home that evening, running my fingers along the weathered gate I'd repaired countless times. The paint was chipping again, flaking away like memories nobody wanted to keep. Behind me, the Arabian Sea stretched endlessly, indifferent to human grief. This house had been my world since childhood. Every crack in the foundation I'd filled, every leak in the ceiling I'd patched. When the monsoons threatened to tear away the tin roof, I'd climbed up in the rain while Dev was away in the city, living his ambitious life. Our mother sat inside, her silence heavier than words. She hadn't argued when the lawyer read the will. Perhaps she'd known all along. Dev had always been father's favorite, the son with dreams bigger than fishing nets and morning tides. I was just Arun, reliable and invisible. Days blurred into routine after that. I woke before sunrise, walked to the harbor, and helped the older fishermen repair their boats. They paid me in fish and gratitude, never cash, and I never asked. Mrs. Pillai, the widow next door, received her share of the catch each evening. She'd stopped thanking me months ago, understanding that some kindness doesn't need acknowledgement. My wife Mira moved through our small rented room above the tackle shop with quiet grace. She'd married me knowing I had nothing but calloused hands and a gentle heart. We never spoke about the will, though I caught her watching me sometimes with eyes full of unspoken questions. The house loomed in the distance whenever I walked through the village, a constant reminder of rejection. Yet I couldn't hate it. Those walls held my childhood, my father's laughter, my mother's prayers. Hate seemed like a betrayal of something sacred. Dev returned from the city 3 weeks later, driving a rented car that looked obscene against our village's dusty roads. He wore expensive shoes that clicked against the stone pathway, carrying perfumed bags for our mother. His laughter boomed through the house, too loud, too confident, filling spaces that used to hold father's quiet wisdom. "Brother," he called out, embracing me with arms that smelled of cologne and ambition. "Still fixing boats, I see. Someone has to maintain tradition, right?" His words stung like salt water in fresh wounds, but I smiled. Our mother fussed nervously, serving tea in the good cups we saved for festivals. She moved between us like a diplomat in a silent war, desperate to bridge worlds that had drifted too far apart. Dev talked endlessly about his business ventures, his connections, his plans. He never once asked about my life, about Mira, about the neighbors who still remembered his name but not his face. One evening, I found Dev measuring the house with a tape, muttering numbers under his breath. "This wall could come down," he said, tapping the kitchen partition. "Open floor plan, modern aesthetic. This place could fetch good money as a cafe or guest house." Each word felt like a hammer against my chest. These weren't just walls to me. This was where mother taught me to cook fish curry, where father told stories about the sea monster that stole his best net, where Dev and I once drew stick figures on the floor with charcoal, dreaming of futures we'd never share. That night, unable to sleep, I walked through the house in darkness. My fingers traced familiar paths along the corridor wall. Near the staircase, I noticed a loose board I'd somehow missed during years of repairs. Curiosity overcame exhaustion. I pried it gently, and underneath, wrapped in oilcloth, lay a rusted tin box covered in Father's careful handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened the box. Inside lay a single letter, yellowed with age, written in Father's shaky script. The ink had faded in places, making some words impossible to read. "There is a promise from long ago," it began. "A man from the sea, a debt that follows like shadow following light. When the time comes, remember that not all gifts arrive wearing the face you expect." The letter ended abruptly, mid-sentence, as if Father had been interrupted or lost courage to finish. I read it 3 times, my heart pounding harder with each pass. What promise? What man? Father had never mentioned any debt. I folded the letter carefully, my mind racing with questions that now had no one to answer them. Dev's voice drifted from upstairs, talking on his phone about demolition costs. I decided to keep this discovery secret, at least for now.
2 days later, while mending nets near the harbor, I noticed an elderly man sitting alone on the rocks. He held a fishing rod wrapped in silk thread, an oddly elegant detail among the rough equipment of working fishermen. His clothes were simple but clean, his face weathered by sun and time. When I approached, he smiled as if recognizing an old friend. "You must be Arun," he said softly. "You have your father's hands. Strong but gentle." I stopped, confused. "Did you know my father?" The old man's eyes crinkled. "I knew him when the sea tried to claim me, and he said no." Before I could ask more, he stood, bowed slightly, and walked toward the village. I followed, but he vanished into the morning crowd. When I asked the other fishermen about him, they looked at me strangely. Nobody had seen any stranger by the rocks. The next morning, the same old man appeared at my small food stall near the beach. I sold tea and fried snacks to fishermen before their morning departures. He asked for soup, and I gave him my last bowl, refusing payment despite his protests. "Your father once gave everything when he had nothing," the man said, his voice carrying strange weight. "His kindness still feeds me, decades later." My pulse quickened. "Please, tell me how you knew him." But he simply blessed me, touching my forehead gently. "What goes into the sea comes back with the tide. Your father understood this. Soon you will too." He handed me a small carved wooden fish, identical to ones Father used to make during monsoon storms when he couldn't go out on the water. When I looked up to thank him, he had disappeared again, leaving only the wooden fish warming my palm. Dev's impatience grew like storm clouds on the horizon. He pressured Mother to sign sale documents, spreading papers across the dining table with aggressive confidence. "I'll take care of Arun later," he assured her, not knowing I stood just outside the door. "But we need to move fast before property prices drop." Mother's voice was barely a whisper. "Your brother has nowhere else to go." Dev laughed, cold and dismissive. "Brother is content fixing nets and feeding strangers. He doesn't want more from life. I'm doing him a favor by not burdening him with property management." I walked away before I could hear more, my chest tight with something between anger and grief. That night, a violent storm struck. Lightning cracked the sky like breaking glass, and thunder shook our small room above the tackle shop. Through the rain, I saw flames near the old fishing hut where I stored tools and repair materials. I ran through the storm, rain soaking through my clothes instantly. The fishing hut's door hung open, and inside, papers were scattered across the floor, some still smoldering from a lightning strike. Among the debris, I found Father's old account ledger, pages charred at the edges. Most entries were mundane, recording fish sold, equipment bought, small debts settled. But near the middle, one line was circled in red ink. "Debt repaid, gratitude received. Don't forget Arun's share of the tide." The handwriting beside it wasn't Father's. It was elegant, educated, belonging to someone who'd never worked with nets and salt. I knelt there in the rain leaking through the damaged roof, holding the ledger against my chest. What debt? What share? Father had been a simple fisherman, never wealthy, never connected to anyone beyond our village. Yet here was evidence of something larger, something deliberately hidden. A week later, a man in a worn but dignified coat appeared at Mother's door. He carried a leather briefcase that had seen better years, and his eyes held the patient sadness of someone who delivered difficult news many times before. "I'm looking for the late Shivram's family," he said. When Mother explained Father had passed, the man nodded solemnly. He handed me a business card reading, Krishnan Iyer, Legal Counsel. When your brother attempts to sell the house, he said carefully, tell him to wait for the official deed transfer. The paperwork isn't complete. Dev, overhearing from inside, rushed to the door. What paperwork? The will was clear. The lawyer smiled gently. Wills declare intention. Deeds declare ownership. They're not always the same thing. Before Dev could respond, the man turned and walked away, leaving us staring at his card and each other with new confusion. Dev hired workers the following week, ignoring the lawyer's cryptic warning. Hammers broke through walls, exposing old wood and ancient brick. The sound felt like violence, each crash another wound in the house's body. Mother pleaded for them to stop, but Dev brushed her aside with promises of modern renovations and profit margins. I stood in the yard, watching strangers dismantle my childhood. A neighbor, Mrs. Shetty, muttered as she passed. It's always the quiet ones who carry the curse of watching. I looked at her, surprised. No, I replied, more to myself than her. We carry something else. We carry hope that goodness remembers its children. That evening, Mira held my hand as we watched sunset paint the water gold and crimson. Something is coming, she whispered. I can feel it in how the wind changed. I nodded, unable to explain why I believed her. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by registered post. The postman made Mother sign 3 times, emphasizing its legal importance. The return address listed a law firm from a distant city, one none of us recognized. Dev grabbed the envelope first, his fingers trembling with eagerness. But the front clearly read Arun and Mira. Not Dev. Not Mother. Just us. Dev's face twisted with confusion and anger. Why would legal documents come addressed to you? He demanded. I had no answer. Mira stood beside me, equally baffled. We'd never hired lawyers, never signed any contracts. Mother clutched her prayer beads, whispering appeals to gods who seemed to be writing a story none of us had read. Dev tore open the envelope with shaking hands, pulling out official papers stamped with government seals and legal emblems. His face went from curious to pale to absolutely bloodless in seconds. This is impossible, Dev whispered, reading aloud. Official property deed. Legal owner, Mira, wife of Arun, son of Shivram. The words hung in the air like smoke that wouldn't clear. Mother gasped, dropping her beads. They clattered across the floor, each small sound enormous in the shocked silence. Mira covered her mouth, shaking her head. I never signed anything. I don't understand. I stood frozen, unable to process what I'd just heard. The house was in Mira's name? How? When? Father had been clear in his will. He'd chosen Dev. I'd accepted that rejection, made peace with it. Yet here was paper, official and undeniable, saying something completely different. Dev's hands shook as he read through the attached documents. Transfer date, witness signatures, legal stamps. Everything appeared legitimate. His face transformed from shock to fury in heartbeats. You did this, he hissed at me. You manipulated him. Forged papers while he was dying. Dev's shouting brought neighbors to their windows. This is fraud, he screamed, throwing the papers at me. You took advantage of a sick old man. I'll have you arrested. I'll contest this in every court in the country. Mira stepped between us, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. Arun didn't do anything. He didn't even know. But Dev was beyond listening. His face flushed red, veins visible at his temples. Years of accumulated superiority and entitlement poured out in accusations and threats. Mother tried to calm him, but he pushed past her, grabbing his phone. I'm calling my lawyer right now. This won't stand. That house is mine. He stormed out, still shouting, slamming the gate hard enough to crack the wooden post. Neighbors whispered behind their hands. Mrs. Pillai brought me water, her expression unreadable. I sat on the front step, holding the deed with hands that no longer felt like my own. The next morning, Krishnan Iyer returned. This time, he carried a worn folder filled with documents. He sat at our small table, declining tea, and spread papers before us with practiced precision. Your father, he began, addressing Mother, made arrangements before his death. He wanted to ensure his true wishes were honored, not just the words spoken in grief and guilt. From the folder, he produced an affidavit signed by father, dated 3 weeks before he died. The signature was shaky, but unmistakably his. This property transfer was witnessed by myself and another party, Iyer continued. Everything was done according to law. The will Dev heard read aloud was your husband's emotional declaration. But this, he tapped the deed, is his legal action. They tell different stories. Mother wept quietly. Why didn't he tell us? Iyer's expression softened. Because he wanted to see if Arun's heart would remain kind even when empty of reward. The lawyer continued his story, and with each word, the past 30 years rearranged themselves in my mind. Decades ago, during a terrible monsoon, your father saved a drowning man. He risked his own boat, his own life, pulling a stranger from water that wanted to keep him. That stranger was named Vikram Rao. Iyer paused, letting the name settle. Vikram built considerable wealth in business after that day. He never forgot your father's face, the rough hands that refused death's claim. Years later, when Vikram was dying himself, he instructed me to find Shivram and repay the debt. I found your father 6 months before his own illness became serious. The room felt too small for this story. What debt? I asked. Iyer smiled. The debt of a life given back. Vikram paid off every loan your family held, settled every small obligation, and he convinced your father to make one final quiet decision about who truly deserved his home. Dev learned all of this when he returned with his lawyer. They'd come prepared to contest, armed with legal arguments and righteous fury. But Krishnan Iyer calmly presented documentation of Vikram Rao's involvement, bank transfers showing debts mysteriously disappearing, witness statements from respected community members. Dev's lawyer reviewed everything, his expression growing increasingly uncomfortable. Finally, he whispered something to Dev, whose face crumbled. The transfer is legal, Dev's lawyer admitted. Ironclad, actually. The deed was properly witnessed and registered. You have no grounds to contest. Dev collapsed into a chair, his arrogance finally punctured. But father promised me. In front of everyone, he said the house was mine. Iyer's voice was gentle but firm. He said those words. But weeks earlier, he signed these papers. Your father wanted to see if you treat your brother with respect even after receiving everything. You failed that test. Within days, Dev's business partner in the city cheated him, disappearing with invested money. That night, I dreamed of father. He sat on the beach where we used to repair nets together, his face younger, peaceful. In the dream, waves whispered secrets only the dead can know. I didn't forget you, Arun, father said, his voice carrying across impossible distance. I gave Dev what he expected because I needed to see if your kindness was performance or truth. I needed to know if you'd remain good even when the world seemed unfair. In the dream, I wept. It hurt, Baba. Believing you chose him over me hurt more than I can say. Father touched my face the way he used to when I was small. Pain is often the price of proving what matters most. Your heart stayed gentle even when empty. That's worth more than any house. I woke crying real tears, Mira holding me in the darkness. It's all right, she whispered, though she couldn't possibly understand. The old fisherman I'd met by the harbor appeared again one morning. But this time he wore clean white clothes that seemed to glow in early light. He walked directly to where I stood at the gate of the house that now belonged to my wife. Your father never told you what happened that monsoon night, he said without preamble. I am Vikram Rao. I was the man drowning in the storm. My heart stopped. This was the stranger, the rescued man, the source of the mysterious debt. Your father could have sailed past me, Vikram continued. The storm was terrible, visibility almost zero. But he heard me screaming and turned his boat into the wind. He pulled me from the water, gave me his own dry shirt, shared his tea. He never asked for payment or recognition. He just did what was right. Vikram smiled, his aged face transforming. When I learned he was dying, I made him promise to settle one debt. I would ensure his truest son inherited what mattered. The deed is under Mira's name, Vikram explained, because your father and I agreed she deserved recognition too. She married you knowing you had nothing, yet she never complained, never demanded more. She represents quiet strength, the kind that holds families together when men like your brother tear them apart. I understood then why father had structured everything this way. Not revenge against Dev, not favoritism toward me, but acknowledgement of the people who loved without conditions. "Why didn't you tell me before?" I asked. Vikram handed me another carved fish, companion to the first. "Because you needed to prove your character when you thought the world was unfair. Goodness shown during injustice is the purest kind." He placed both wooden fish in my palm. "These were carved by your father during his final weeks. He told me to give them to you when the truth finally arrived. He believed kindness should never die with those who practice it." Vikram walked toward the sea, and I followed, questions tumbling over each other. "Will I see you again?" He paused at the water's edge, morning light making his white clothes luminous. "I'm old, Arun. My time is borrowed now. But your father's legacy isn't in wood and stone. It's in how you'll choose to use what you've inherited." He touched my shoulder once, gently. "Build something that honors him. Not monuments of pride, but spaces of kindness." Then he walked into the morning mist that rose from the bay, and I couldn't tell if he truly vanished or if my eyes simply couldn't follow him anymore. I stood there holding 2 wooden fish, feeling the weight of expectation and opportunity. Behind me, the house waited, no longer a symbol of rejection but a canvas for something new. Mira appeared beside me, taking my hand. "What will we do?" I smiled. Something father would understand. Dev returned weeks later, broken in ways that had nothing to do with money. His business had collapsed. His friends had abandoned him. The city that had seemed so promising had chewed him up and spit him back to the village he'd dismissed. He stood at our gate, no longer arrogant, no longer dismissive. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I was cruel. I thought wanting more made me better than you. I was wrong." I invited him inside, offered him tea, made him feel welcome. Mira brought food without being asked, understanding that forgiveness is fed before it's spoken. Mother wept with relief, seeing her sons at the same table without anger between them. "This house," Dev said, looking at walls he'd wanted to destroy, "holds more than I understood. I thought it was just property. I didn't see it was proof of everything I failed to value." I nodded, accepting his apology without making him grovel. Over the following months, I repaired the house completely. Not to sell, not for profit, but to transform it into something father would recognize and approve. I turned his bedroom into the heart of a small rest home for aging fishermen, men who'd spent their lives on the water and now had nowhere to rest their bones. The community donated furniture, time, and support. Mrs. Pillai organized meal schedules. Even Dev helped, painting walls, fixing windows, doing penance through labor. On opening day, Krishnan Iyer attended, smiling at what kindness had built. "Your father knew," he said, watching elderly fishermen settle into clean beds with soft blankets. "He knew you'd use this gift not for yourself, but for others. That's why he chose you." Mira stood beside me, her quiet strength now recognized and celebrated. The house filled with laughter, stories, the smell of fish curry and chai. Years have passed now. I still repair nets at dawn, still help neighbors who can't pay. But the house, father's legacy, has become something larger than one family's story. It's become proof that goodness remembers its children, even when the path seems impossibly tangled. I keep the 2 wooden fish on a shelf where morning light finds them. Sometimes I hold them, remembering father's hands carving them during his final days, believing that his quiet son understood what truly mattered. Dev visits often now, humbled and changed. He works as my assistant at the rest home, finding purpose in service instead of profit. Mother says prayers of gratitude each evening, thanking gods who write justice in tides and timber. And Mira? She moves through the house with grace, the unexpected owner of something that was always supposed to be hers. Kindness, I've learned, is the only inheritance time cannot erase. It returns in circles too wide for us to see, wearing faces we never expected, arriving when we've stopped looking for rewards. Father understood this. Now, finally, so do I.